I want to share some very exciting results with you that will allow you to learn faster. These are results that were published in the journal Cell Reports, a Cell Press journal. The study was carried out in humans, and what this study involved was having humans remember a certain motor skill sequence. So it could be keys on a piano, but this would also be true for other types of learning. So this could be learning for sake of sports, learning music, learning numbers, etc. They had people learn this sequence and perform that sequence as many times as possible. I've talked before about the importance of generating maximum number of repetitions per unit time in order to trigger the neuroplasticity/learning process. Now, that activity of generating a lot of repetitions also tends to generate a lot of errors. People don't always perform the sequence correctly, and the more repetitions you're trying to perform often means the more errors you're performing. I've also talked about how errors are good because those errors cue your forebrain, which is involved in your attention. It can actually gate neuroplasticity, actually flip on the switch for neuroplasticity. It flips on those brain circuits that give you heightened levels of attention on subsequent repetitions. In other words, when you make mistakes, and you make a lot of mistakes, it flips on the brain areas that cue you to doing things correctly on subsequent trials. Now, this new study capitalizes on all of that, but introduces what are called little micro rests. These little micro rests involve doing the skill training at maximum number of repetitions per unit time, but every so often stopping completely and just resting for 10 seconds at a time. So inserting these little 10-second micro rests was shown to greatly accelerate rates of learning as well as retention of the learned information. Now, this is interesting, but what's really interesting about this study is that they also figured out why this works. During these little micro rests, in which people can have eyes open or eyes closed, they're just not doing anything. They're not moving, they're just stationary, resting for 10 seconds. The hippocampus, a brain area involved in learning and memory, as well as the neocortex, a brain area also involved in learning and memory and storage of long-term information, becomes active and repeats the same sequence of neuron firing that was present during the actual performance of the sequence at 20 times the speed. So in other words, when you do something and then you inject a little bit of micro rest, during that micro rest, your brain continues to repeat the firing that was generated during the actual performance, but 20 times faster, and both in the forward and reverse direction, which may give you flexibility over the learned skill, etc. Forward and reverse playback of neuronal firing of a given sequence is actually what's seen during sleep and is known to be important for learning in sleep. So what does this mean? How do you translate this to your own life or your own learning practices? Well, in this study, they had people do 10 seconds of a given motor skill that they were trying to learn, and then 10 seconds of rest. 10 seconds of the skill, 10 seconds of the rest. That might not be feasible for a lot of types of learning and practices. So what I would suggest is exploring inserting 10-second micro rests at less frequent intervals, maybe once every minute or so. Now, if the thing that you're doing is something that would allow for these more frequent introduction of these 10-second rest periods, then go for it. It's a super interesting study. I'm going to talk all about the details of that study, including how that informs more detailed protocols. I'll provide a link to the full study in the episode of the Huberman Lab podcast that's coming out this Monday. You can find the link to our podcast in all forms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. All cost free, of course, at the link in my profile bio. It's hubermanlab.com. That episode will be up at about 6 a.m. Pacific time on Monday. Monday morning is also always when we release episodes. In addition, we've got the episode with Dr. Carl Deisseroth, who's a psychiatrist, bioengineer, research scientist at Stanford School of Medicine. That one is up right now. It's the first interview episode of the Huberman Lab podcast where we talk about things like mental health and Dr. Deisseroth's clinical practice and experience with people with autism, ADHD, etc., as well as the efforts that his laboratory is making, creating these incredible bioengineering tools to understand how the mind works and how the disordered mind works and so forth. So again, please check out the episode with Dr. Carl Deisseroth. If you want to learn more about this learning practice, please tune in on Monday at 6 a.m. or afterward. It'll be up thereafter. And do consider inserting these little 10-second micro rests. Maybe you'll even insert one right now, and then all of this will be encoded to memory perfectly. As always, please put your comments and questions in the comment section below this post or on the YouTube channel below the episodes. That's where we go to look for information and ideas about future episodes, etc. We do read all the comments. And as always, Thank you for your interest in science.